The Laura Flanders Show. This is a place to go for stories of resilience, power shifting, and change rooted in love. This is Leah Penniman from Soulfire Farm.
The Laura Flanders Show is made possible by listeners just like you. You can become a sustaining member and help keep our programming independent, audacious, and ad-free. Go to patreon.com/The LF Show and become a member. Hi, I'm Laura, and this is the Laura Flanders Show, a TV and radio program that shines a light on the solutions of tomorrow today. We report on the people and movements driving systemic change from the worlds of politics, arts, and entrepreneurship. Welcome. Imagine a source of news, music, cooking classes, and kids shows. A kind of media platform that wasn't there to sell you something, steal your data, or track what you observe. A channel free of political bias, mostly, and mostly free of ads. A channel set up in the public interest and subsidized by Congress. You might call such a service public broadcasting. And since 1967, the U.S. has actually had such a thing. The Public Broadcasting Service, or PBS.
Good evening. I'm Ed Murrow, and this is something rather different. Commercial television did not completely fill the promise of this medium. That is the reason educational television was conceived.
Is it a great idea whose time has come and gone? Audiences are moving online, and this March a large group of filmmakers of color called PBS out for a lack of diversity. The year of the great pandemic shut-in could have been a chance for public television to shine, did it? Walking into this morass of important questions is today's guest, longtime PBS executive Sylvia Bugg. She was promoted to Chief Programming Executive and General Manager of General Audience Programming last October. We are thankful for her service and honored to have her with us today. Sylvia, thank you so much. The length of your title indicates its importance, so I just want you to explain what your responsibilities are, and I'll put my cards on the table. Do I need to be scared that you can boot me off this program if I ask the wrong kind of question?
Laura, I would never do that. I'm so thrilled to be on with you today, and I've actually been looking forward to it. So yes, Sylvia Bugg, Chief Programming Executive and General Manager of General Audience Programming for PBS. And in all of that, what matters, the difference, is general audience programming. So my team oversees all of the content strategy for primetime programming, non-children's programming. So that's another department. And so we really do look at all of our content for our primetime schedule, working with producers, working with PBS member stations, major producing stations, and an array of production companies to deliver great, compelling content for the primetime schedule.
I want to congratulate you on the Black Church series, which launched, I think it was round about Valentine's Day this year. You were involved, and it was something to be proud of.
The history of the Black Church explores the rich, complex, and nuanced history of faith since our ancestors arrived on these shores all the way to the 21st century.
You want to tell people about it?
So that actually had been in development for a while. As you know, programming on PBS, particularly the multi-hours primetime programming, it takes a while. It takes a while to gather funding. It takes a while to get programs filmed. And of course, during a pandemic, just when you think you have a great engagement plan, COVID happens. And so there was a lot of shifting, but I think we're all very proud of the Black Church that premiered with Dr. Henry Louis Gates Jr. It was just a special time. Me growing up in the Black Church, it was especially personal and just a great time, I think, for PBS to have content that really speaks to a wide variety of our audiences, and just to see the outpouring of support and some of what we were able to do in the engagement space with that particular miniseries was just fantastic. So thank you.
Well, let's talk about that engagement space. You know, as I mentioned, we're in a moment, and this will not come as news to anybody, of tremendous transition when it comes to media and engagement. It was shocking to me recently to talk to a woman in her 40s, a woman of means, white woman, grew up in Washington, D.C., and I mentioned public broadcasting to her, and she said the image that came into her head was a black and white TV set with rabbit ear antennas. So help me, Sylvia. Tell us why you care so much about public broadcast.
I'm a kid of the 70s. I grew up in rural Southern Virginia during a time when we were lucky to get a good signal out of the Richmond, Virginia market or further south out of the Durham, Raleigh, North Carolina market. So we sit right in between those two areas. And so I grew up watching PBS, and without it, I don't think I would have been exposed to all of what I learned thanks to PBS. And so fast forward, it is a unique opportunity for me to be able to come back to PBS. And this is my third tour at PBS, actually. So some people don't know I was here in the 90s and I left and I came back. So this is my third time at PBS, and third time is always a charm. And so I do like to think of PBS content as a place where you can take that programming and it will last far beyond just a premiere or just a night in the schedule. Some of the feedback that we got, particularly during COVID, was how stations and markets were able to use our content during at-home virtual learning. So I like to think of us as, yes, providing content, but also being a service provider.
Our newest service is PBS At-Home Learning, a robust schedule of educational TV to assist with distance learning every weekday.
Many PBS watchers of a certain age have warm and fuzzy feelings about programs like Sesame Street, Big Bird, Reading Rainbow, and Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. For decades, PBS has brought the nation nonpartisan news as well, reporting like the PBS NewsHour and so on, deep dives into history, culture, and science.
There I was in the world's first national park, and I remember going down into Hayden Valley. There were bison crossing over the road, 2,000-pound mammals crossing over the road, and it was so cold, it was about 60 below zero. And I was all alone, but I felt I was in the presence of everything around me, and I was never alone.
PBS has in its time been an innovator, not only of programming, from Julia Childs to Tongues Untied,
brother to brother, brother to brother. Silence is my sword.
It cuts both ways.
but also to technology like descriptive captioning and pioneering digital broadcast. Along the way, it has often had to fight for its own existence as Republicans from Reagan to Romney threatened to slash funding. But PBS has endured and remained in 2020 the most trusted public institution in America. All of that said, the programming service and the funders behind it, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, have come under criticism many times, but most recently this March, when a long list of filmmakers of color, including several that have been on this program and several that make programming for PBS, called PBS out for its over-reliance on one cis, white, hetero, oldish guy, Ken Burns, for telling the story, all the stories of American history. I'm sure you share these concerns. What, in your capacity, are you actually going to be doing to diversify who gets funded to tell our stories?
That's a great question, Laura, and thank you for bringing this up, because I agree. We have a strong foundation in PBS and public media. We have a history of inclusive programming. However, we do recognize that there is more work that we all can do, that we can do, PBS specifically, and we welcome that dialogue on this important issue. So I feel like these conversations can be on two tracks. So one is to, of course, think of ways to, and actually develop ways to bring more inclusive content into the pipeline. But I think we also need to look at what does the future look like in terms of ensuring, and I've always said this, that PBS's content should be reflective of the audiences that we serve. With that, we have to look for more ways that we can bring in more funding, because we know that PBS isn't a single source. We know that CPB isn't a single source. So we often have to go out for those limited dollars, either through philanthropic support or corporate support. So I'm excited in this role to be able to kickstart those conversations and do it in a way that really ensures that we're on a good path. We have a good framework for how we can think about not just, content, but also look at, those opportunities that we need to create to feed the talent pipeline of the next generation of makers from diverse backgrounds, including BIPOC makers. And then also look at what are those long-term sustainability efforts that I think is incumbent for all of us to think about.
We're big believers in partnerships here, and one of the partnerships I'm excited about in the works here at the Laura Flanders Show is partnering with some of the extraordinary local media outlets that, people talk about a crisis in journalism. I actually think there's an extraordinarily exciting efflorescence of journalism happening, a lot in BIPOC people of color hands, but also at the local level, doing journalism in a whole different way. And when we can connect those journalists with our national platform, which is also in their backyard because we're on that local station, I think we're going to see some exciting things. So stay tuned for that.
Can you feel my energy?
This is the Laura Flanders Show. I'm Laura. My guest is Sylvia Bugg, Chief Programming Executive for General Audience Programming at PBS. She's a veteran when it comes to programming for public broadcasting, having served as VP of Diversity and TV Content at the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. As our lovely podcast and radio listeners know, this show originates as a television program, and we're now in our second season, airing on public television stations coast to coast. You can watch the show and find all the details at our website, lauraflanders.org. And while you're there, be sure to sign up for our newsletter to receive information on our streaming events like live talkbacks and web exclusives, including my full uncut interview with Bugg. You don't want to miss any of that or my commentaries. I call them the F word. The latest offers a little perspective on what local reporting looks like of the January 6th insurrection at the Capitol. Next, with PBS especially poised to be a catalyst in this country in building trust in civil society, as noted by media critic Ellen Goodman recently, how can it bridge the digital divide and make the shift as public broadcasting becomes a public media service in these times? But first, here's Wyclef Jean and Nikki performing Electric City, produced by Wyclef Jean in 2009 for the PBS Kids series, The New Electric Company. Like the original, it made reading cool and targeted the literacy gap between low and middle-income kids.
Come on. Welcome to my city filled with electricity, where you can be anything you want to be. Yeah. Welcome to my city filled with electricity, yeah, where you can be anything you want to be. A doctor, a lawyer, a rapper, a singer. That's what I got. An astronaut, let's take it out of space. She wanna be an actress with a pretty face. Or you could be the president of the United States. Or you could be like Jerry Wonder and slap that bass. 2 steps to the left, that's electric. 2 steps to the right, that's electric. 2 steps to the front, that's electric. Now slide. 2 steps to the back, you're electric. Hands up now, freeze. Feel my electricity, yeah. Slide. Come on. Welcome to my city filled with electricity.
I want you to talk about digital. In order for you to become the network and the programmer for general audiences that you want to be, you've already said it can't just be trying to get people to turn on their television sets. And in an interesting story not long ago in the Columbia Journalism Review, you had Ellen Goodman, the longtime media critic and writer, saying this is a perfect time for public broadcasting as a public service to be engaged in this sort of building of trust in the civil society of this country. But in order to do that, you have to shift from public broadcasting service to a public media service. And how do you do that? And then how do you do that without increased congressional, which is to say macro federal support.
It is the one thing that I think about most often, along with everything that you've referenced in terms of thinking about a digital transformation. It's also an education, right? So we have to say, no longer are we just focused on overnight broadcast numbers and that part of the metrics. We really need to think about this holistically. So I will tell you a funny story. I have two nephews who are in their early to mid 20s, and I had an extra TV lying around, and I said, "Hey guys, do you want this extra TV that I have? I don't need it." And they said, "No, we don't need a TV because we use our phone. We use the laptops that you brought us when they were in college, and they use their iPads to consume content." So it is not to say that we abandon what we do in terms of a content focus on linear broadcast, but we need to look at, and I'm using one of my colleagues' phrases, a spherical approach where content and audience is really in the middle of this experience that PBS will take them through, but we can find ways to customize that content for my nephews. They grew up in the Black church, so I said, hey, I know they're not going to watch PBS broadcasts, but they sure enough tuned in to Facebook. They tuned in to some of the other platforms, either PBS owned or third-party platforms that we partner with to experience, for example, the Black church. And so there is what I call the bread and butter of PBS content that will remain consistent and constant. But I think in this mass media ecosystem, there is a pretty vast opportunity for us to look at some of these digital opportunities for growth across our content strategy.
What do they have in common that makes it public broadcasting? What's the public part?
If you watch PBS, you know that Wednesday nights is science, Sunday nights is drama, Monday nights you're going to get certain content, Friday nights you might get over to news and public affairs content baked in with some arts content. But what are those sub-theme categories where we can say this is a theme or thread of content that is relevant, that's timely, that really does reflect many of the conversations that are not only being had in some ways globally and nationally, but what are you talking to your neighbors about in your local community? What do you get together at dinner time with your family and talk about in terms of those issues of the moment that we can really think about providing content opportunities in ways that hopefully we can bring in a younger audience. In my mind, I've been thinking about during this time of COVID, there's been amazing resiliency from artists. And what more can we do to highlight arts during COVID? I think climate and the environment is another example that we've really been leaning into, a solutions-based storytelling approach. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there for PBS to maintain its core content that will continue to serve our core audiences. And I'm excited about that content, as well as how could we lean more into issues that have become a part of our everyday life and existence. And some are painful and challenging, but I think that's where the S in PBS comes in terms of being a service.
There are programmers all across the country. I know several who work at CBS and Channel 1 in New York who would say the same kind of thing as you're saying about what they want to put on the air. But there is something different about the structure of public broadcasting, which is to say it's not broken up every 10 minutes by advertising, although there are increasingly long underwriting statements. What makes it structurally, institutionally different? And the reason this is so important is it speaks to our moment politically with the new administration talking about infrastructure and rebuilding community wealth and broadband. And I keep saying community media is part of community wealth. And how come they don't talk about media, meaning things like PBS, when they're talking about rebuilding infrastructure? Structurally, where you've had fights every generation to fight for resources, public broadcasting and television and radio and cable. But in the current era, we haven't really had this fight beyond net neutrality, which was super important, but not about public, commercial-free space for communication.
Yeah, and I think those are all very important points. And I would just say from, again, sort of a content perspective, when we talk about these public and open spaces, it is such that we don't avoid some of those challenging conversations. And so, for example, I'm interested in how PBS can be a service to present this national content, but also in a way that we can bring in our local stations and their perspectives. I was speaking to a station general manager a few months ago about some of the work that she's doing to help bridge divides in her communities, particularly following the election. So we have started to think about democracy, how we define democracy, depending on who you are and your backgrounds can be very different. And so just because, right, you turn a page on a calendar, it doesn't mean that these important issues that should be a part of the public discussion and dialogue go away. And so I think that is one of the unique values that we can have in PBS and public media is we don't do the pin drop or the popcorn and then we move on to the next issue. For us, it's really about how we can embed some of these themes and topics. So we've been talking about democracy and how do we translate that into content that is not didactic, that is not everything we've seen before. So really for me, the big question is why this content and why now? And so I think when we have to look at the total dynamic of the service that we offer, we have to constantly ask ourselves that question, what continues to keep us relevant? And it's not a one size fits all. So to the extent that we can really, really answer that question and we pose it to our producers. So you have this idea for a show, why now? And really try to query that and go a bit deeper into the producers to find out, you know, what is the thing that moves them about this particular project. And then we work to find how we can make those connections into our local markets and communities. And hopefully in a way, it can help to further drive their value as well, and us to continue to be able to provide these content and services because it is a membership organization. So we're absolutely here to serve our local stations.
And what difference that makes to programmers, for those of you who are watching or listening out there, is, well, it was brought home to me very starkly recently when I was, watching my local cable news. And the entire discussion around vaccinations and different companies with different vaccines was interspersed with advertising from big pharmaceutical corporations, which made you kind of think, well, these are sometimes we're getting kind of mixed messages. And here on public television, I felt that this was the only place, for example, that our show could have a discussion with a scientist and an economist who says, really we need to have publicly owned patents of vaccines. Big pharmaceuticals owning these patents is a problem. And it occurred to me, I wonder if I'd even be able to really have that conversation, at least in any kind of serious way, on a program that was funded by, Big Pharma. So that does come back to your funding source. And I know you're the programming czar, not the funding czar. But you mentioned members. Do you have a DC strategy right now to increase the funding for the system? And what is your kind of pledge to members vis-a-vis the publicness, the commercial freeness of this network?
Part of our funding is public funding through the appropriation. And I used to work at the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, so I have some knowledge of how those funds are just so important and critical for the work that we do across the public media system, not just on the content side, but also on services and the health of the system, of the public media system. So I think for us, it's always thinking about what those unique and dynamic models are. And I will say, Laura, I feel like, and to some extent even now, but after last summer and all of the challenges that we had around the murder of George Floyd, I felt like corporations and major organizations, and we were all talking about racial inequities and what is it that we need to do to help to further support some of that work that was happening, is continuing to happen across countries, communities in the country. And so in my mind, I was thinking, this is an opportunity for us to look at even our partnership, and you talked about some of your partnerships, but to look at that model and that structure as a way that we can go out and further expand our fundraising opportunities and models and ways that to find natural touch points for funding support. we can't just rely on one single source. It's always been that way. And I think it will continue to be an area for us to focus on. So if I can continue to do that part on the content side, to provide this content that we can make a case for the value for further support, that's my focus and what I'm encouraged that we can accomplish, that we can do for the future. So here's to the next 50 years of PBS.
Non-invasive, not-for-profit, and did I mention free? If ever there was a time to invest in American public media, surely this is that time. The COVID-19 pandemic's proved there's a lot to be said for public services, like public libraries, the post office, public hospitals, and public schools. They may not be perfect, but they were there when we needed them, and for millions of Americans unable to access quality streaming internet or school, public television was there for them and their kids when they were stuck at home. Don't get me wrong, family-owned newsrooms, especially local ones, have long needed help. Give them a stimulus, tax credits for subscribers, a new journalist jobs program, add nonprofit reporters, especially women and reporters of color, to AmeriCorps. Forgive their student loans. Congress is looking at bills to do all of the above and more. But when it comes to nonprofit public media, our system needs more than a bailout. Public media needs Americans to buy in for the very first time. While every other wealthy nation spends around $100 per head for public media of different kinds, the U.S. government spends just over $1, and leaving journalism to the markets worked as well as leaving healthcare there. You can complain all you like about spies and snake oil salesmen messing with the news and your neighbors' heads, but the best alternative to profit and power-driven media is a system paid for and dedicated to the public, to serve the public interest. We haven't seen a major commitment in that since the days of LBJ and before that FDR. So while people are talking about new deals for a better future and investments in clean air and water and other public goods, how about a new deal for democracy by way of a real investment in public media and not-for-profit news? We're not talking the Politburo, we're talking PBS, or what PBS and public radio would be like if the systems and the independent public producers who contribute to them, like us, didn't have to go begging for every dime. Let's build back different, and build our democracy different by having a deep investment in public media institutions and the means to keep them that way. For more information on this week's guest, Sylvia Bugg of PBS, go to patreon.com/The LF Show. That's patreon.com/The LF Show, where you will find a suggested list of reading, viewing, and listening related to this episode. While you're there, we invite you to watch the show, now in our second season on American Public TV. We're currently being carried on over 270 stations each week. Check your local listings or join us at our YouTube channel, where the show premieres every week at 11:30 Eastern Sundays. You can also participate in our live post-show chat. All the details are at patreon.com/The LF Show. At Patreon, that's also where you can become a Patreon partner of this show by committing to a monthly donation. You can make it of any size, large or small. We know how to use every dime. Syndication costs a lot, and it takes all of us to chip in. This May, we need to raise $25,000 from our listeners to get us through to the fall. Make a donation today, and if you're strapped for cash, make a contribution of time by following us on social media and spreading the word. This show's produced by yours truly, Laura Flanders, with Matt Colacello, Jeremiah Cothren, Mercedes Grostiaga, Jeannie Hopper, Nat Needham, Charlotte Carpenter, David Newman, Rory O'Connor, Ryan Hote, Sabrina Artel, and Jeanette Hernandez. Major funding for this program is provided by the Novo, Park, Ellen Poss Family, Hisuku Wilson Foundations, the Schumann Media Center, Rising Fund at Tides, Kim Connor and Nick Groombridge, Jane Fonda, and listeners like you. Thanks for listening. Thanks for contributing. Thanks for your ideas. Stay kind. Stay curious. Until the next time, I'm Laura.